Several years ago, I asked my parents when they knew for sure that the other was going to be their life partner forever. They told me that the best way to do so is, so to speak, go into the unknown. Pick a place that is foreign to both of you, preferably another country, stay there for a few days, and then return home afterwards. Both of their reasonings were that it is when one is in a foreign land or in a situation that is far outside your norm that it reveals what one's inner behavior is really like. For instance, if you end up getting turned around and lost, who stays calm or gets agitated? Who likes to plan versus who likes to call it as they see it? Who likes to spend the time out and about versus relaxing? And perhaps most significantly, who is inherently friendly? The ultimate underlying question to all of these is one of trust. Can you trust the person that you want to marry to take care of you, and you in return take care of them? I bring up this little story not just because I find it to be unironically good life advice, and was in fact partly responsible for why I ended up breaking up with someone, among other reasons that I'd frankly not like to get into.
Do you have a moment to talk about our Lord and Savior, Jesus Christ?
But also because it's one of the primary thoughts that I had as I started watching The 12 Kingdoms, or Juuni Kokuki, released in 2002 by Studio Pierrot, directed by Kobayashi Tsuneo, and based on the series of light novels by Ono Fuyumi. The story concerns a group of high school students: Nakajima Yoko, a timid student with striking red hair, Ikuya Asano, an affable personality of sorts and companion to Nakajima, even though he's a bit awkward, and Sugimoto Yuka, a loner who seems so prickly that being in close proximity would get a needle in your arm. An encounter with a magical being named Keiki and a battle at the school transports these three characters away from Japan and into the titular 12 Kingdoms, adrift and needing to find a way home. Or so it would seem on the surface. Throughout the course of the show's first arc, which comprises about 14 episodes, one of the running threads has been the notion of trust, and more specifically, how one's attitude about trust influences their thoughts and actions in the midst of being in this foreign world. In circumstances like this, especially when taken somewhere involuntarily, you're forced to operate on minimal information. With fantasy elements overtly at play, you cannot necessarily rely on what you know of your own world in order to help guide and dictate your actions. When you can't even speak the language or interpret it, or find that you can but you aren't sure why that is, you're left out at sea with a barely functional life preserver. And with people and things going out of their way to try and kill you or supposedly befriend you, it's tough to know where to turn or who to trust. All three of the main characters, as well as everyone that they experience in their travels, takes an intriguing approach to this very problem. For Nakajima, she decides to see the inherent trustworthiness in nearly everyone that they meet, and because of the power she has to decipher and communicate in the native language, she acts as the bridge between her group of three outsiders and the natives. Her feelings are not unfounded. To Nakajima, they need to be able to rely on other people if they are going to survive in this world. Without any clear way of knowing where to go, what to do, or how to get there, she chooses belief. If you choose your own path forward, you'll be forced to rely almost purely on instinct. And without a place to even call home or a home base with which to set up some kind of sanctuary, it would only be a matter of time before you make a mistake so terrible that it all explodes in your face. Additionally, several of the characters such as Keiki, the magical creature she encountered at the school, seem to know more about her, a familiarity that seems to provide some kind of safety that would be otherwise missing. He even goes so far as to swear fealty to her, even if she does not necessarily know why he's doing this. But if he was willing to help her, certainly others would be willing to as well, wouldn't they? Believing in the kindness of others is a noble trait to have for oneself, there's no denying that. But on the other hand, there is a point where nobility could be more of a hindrance than a boon, especially in a world that does not seem to welcome you and makes so many efforts to get you killed with demonic Yoma or any other higher authorities. And as such, Nakajima is challenged nearly every step of the way by a malevolent spirit, someone who's getting their jollies out of plunging her into doubt and despair so that she becomes more heartless and bloodthirsty. Since she started out as a scared high school girl in a foreign land, it's easy to understand how she was victimized and warped by this nefarious predator character. As some of the threads that she can grasp within her reach gradually start coming undone, her temper gets shorter, her anger gets more inflamed, and she leans more into her magical abilities with less wherewithal to control herself. The message he preaches to Nakajima is to renounce all trust and survive by appealing to the most base instincts, regardless of lethality. As he gets Nakajima to say in one moment, if she doesn't trust anyone, no one can betray her. Seeing Nakajima triumph over this deliberate antagonism is the first major hurdle her character clears, and is likewise why she's demonstrating herself to be the worthwhile leader in the larger global geopolitical military conflict that the other characters claim she is, as well as with whatever other magical demonic unpleasantries await. Comparatively speaking, Sugimoto opts for violence and is inherently suspicious of everyone and everything. She often chastises Nakajima for being so fragile and trusting other people when nearly everyone that they encounter chooses to betray them for any personal or monetary gain. So while it may seem absolutely barbaric that she would restrain a woman and ask Nakajima to kill her with the sword she's holding, her attitude is not precisely unfounded. Ever since their first introduction to this world, they have barely been in any control of themselves. Bound at some points, preyed upon by suspicious men, and nearly sold into prostitution against their wills by that same woman she insisted they kill, Sugimoto is right to have caution, despite her overzealousness to shed blood too. To her, the 12 Kingdoms are a kill-or-be-killed world, one in which if they do not establish some kind of sense of superiority over those they meet, however kind their intentions may actually be, it'd be akin to signing their own death warrants. The complication to this, however, is that Sugimoto herself is completely taken with the notion that she is, in fact, a superior being within this world. Given her own familiarity with fantasy novels back in Japan, she sees the 12 Kingdoms not merely as a thing to survive in, but also as a thing to rule over, because she sees her fantasy coming to life before her eyes. When Keiki appears to the party and they are whisked away, she has convinced herself that it is some kind of mistake that he is entrusting himself to Nakajima instead of to herself. The evidence to the contrary, manifesting through Nakajima being able to understand and interpret their language, and Sugimoto not being able to unsheath the sword or have any inherent fantastical abilities of her own, fuels her distrust towards her own companion. When the opportunity to leave the party presents itself and she's propositioned that someone needs her help, she immediately takes the opportunity. After all, Nakajima's receiving all the attention is an unacceptable reality to Sugimoto, as though her own genre savviness about fantasy makes her uniquely suited to her new setting. Whatever inabilities she has are a non-issue because she trusts not in another person, so to speak, but rather a prophesied version of herself that she thinks will come in due time. The opportunity presenting itself to Sugimoto, and her taking it, shows that she does ultimately opt to trust in the end, but only those who support this inflated sense of superiority that she possesses. Discarding Asano and Nakajima to the point where, after getting powers of her own, Sugimoto almost kills her, is easy since she never really trusted both of them to keep her safe anyway. By her logic, Yoma had been attacking them because of Nakajima, so how could she pass up the opportunity to break free and gain her own status as a result? If they're attacking Nakajima when, according to Sugimoto, she's not really the chosen one after all, how could being around Nakajima or trusting her to lead everyone wisely be the correct decision? And then there's Asano. Poor Asano. Asano's sense of trust is, in some ways, the most pathetic out of the trio. Compared to Nakajima or Sugimoto, he's mostly just along for the ride and is driven by some rather base impulses like hunger rather than clinging strongly to some moral compass. When Nakajima, in a moment of desperation, suggests robbing some nearby travelers for food, he puts up no resistance to the idea. Much like Sugimoto and Nakajima during her Last Temptations moments, he's willing to do more or less whatever it takes to survive. Because he has no survival skills outside of his own energetic personality, his nonchalance and apathy about doing horrible acts makes him in several ways the worst character by deliberate design. He's someone who doesn't stand for anything. This is why, after Sugimoto leaves and he says that he wishes he could have gone with her, it's not a surprise. Sugimoto's presence is one that is domineering and bloodthirsty, but it's a stance that can be understood quickly, especially since it places so much prioritizing on survival by any means necessary. Perhaps this is why the story seems to suggest, if not making it more overt, that he and Sugimoto could be a couple, evidenced by their little time alone in the forest that Nakajima overhears. He'll go wherever the wind blows, and compared to the seemingly more headstrong Sugimoto, Nakajima for much of the early story is adrift rather than charting a course. But since Sugimoto tries taking her own destiny into her hands, Asano doesn't even have the gumption to try and follow her. And then he falls off a cliff, which is kind of funny, not gonna lie.
ZNote is so insensitive. I personally have fallen off many cliffs in my life, and it was very traumatic.
And then there's the populace. It is written in their mythology that humans that come from the ocean water portals are called Kaikyaku, or Earth humans, and where they are from are Horai, Japan, or Kunlun, China. It is also said that those who come from there are untrustworthy and undesirable, and that they bring calamity or misery to those they encounter. The belief is ingrained at a larger cultural level, and only scant realms such as the Kingdom of En are able to look past this prejudice and accept Kaikyaku as citizens, or at least treat them not nearly so much as lower-class citizens. Based on the actions that we see within the series, it's as though this misfortune mythology does have some validity for the residents in the 12 Kingdoms. As the main trio travels from place to place trying to find some kind of relief, they're dogged by overtly malevolent forces hunting them. Since the population may be none the wiser to this malevolence, the supposed superstitions about Kaikyaku and misfortune are, in their perspective, self-fulfilling, meaning that the townspeople, including other Kaikyaku, are willing to sell them out for their own ends and perceived safety. In this sense, the world gap between the 12 Kingdom people and Kaikyaku is both literal and metaphorical, a constant deluge of miscommunication and incompatible cultural ideologies, fanned further by whatever is this final enemy awaiting. The result is a world that doesn't trust its outsiders, making places like the Kingdom of En seem like oases in a vast desert. For Nakajima, Asano, and Sugimoto, there is no haven to be had if they're constantly running, constantly being betrayed by Nakajima's willingness to trust other people, Sugimoto's inability to trust anyone other than those who substantiate her bloviated sense of self, and Asano's untrustworthiness to contribute anything meaningful to what's going on. This is part of the reason why 12 Kingdoms makes for a fascinating series in the beginning. Compared to most other fantasy anime, isekai or otherwise, in which the friendliness of a fantasy world or its populace generally feels like a given rather than a thing to be navigated, it actually feels like a world that, even in its familiar human figures and fantastical iconographies, is other in how it alienates its party through cultural and ideological distrust, and how that distrust seeps into the main characters at the start. To put it another way, trust in the 12 Kingdoms is at a premium. So trust wisely, and move cautiously. And watch this anime. Trust me on that. A special thank you to my patrons, and a thank you for watching. Feel free to like, comment, subscribe, click the bell for notifications so you don't miss an upload, donate to my Patreon, or follow my social media accounts. Links provided in the video's description. In the meantime, this has been ZNote of ZNoteTaku. Happy viewing, everyone!